Hey guys, welcome back to another Coding Flamingo video. In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 common Azure security mistakes that people make when creating Azure resources and how to fix them. This video is brought to you by EasySSH, the easiest way to manage SSH access. EasySSH leverages your Azure identity to create short-term SSH certificates and authenticate you to your SSH endpoint. SSH certificates are native to OpenSSH, so most Linux-based systems can use them, from your huge cloud VM to your home Raspberry Pi. Give it a try and request a demo with the link in the description down below. And for Coding Flamingo viewers, we're giving a free month. Just mention Coding Flamingo when you schedule your demo. So let's start with public storage accounts. So this used to be a big problem when cloud was starting. There was a lot of companies that got breached because they were exposing their storage accounts to the public and they just didn't expect people to crawl them and find the information, or they didn't know that it was being exposed to everybody. Over the past few years, companies have, like Azure and AWS, have been becoming better at protecting users from doing this. As you can see in this one, for example, this storage account that I'm looking at, it doesn't allow me to change the blobs to anything else other than non-anonymous access. And that's something set at the storage account level. So as you can see here, blob public access. So in here you could change it, and there's some specific scenarios where this is still usable. For example, like the logos for my company, like I have them in a blob that is public, so then the CDN can grab them, the users can see it. But for any data or anything, it should always be disabled and no anonymous access should be allowed into the blob storages. The second one is not having MFA. It's crazy to think that in 2021, there's still many accounts that are yet to have strong authentication methods. And nowadays, it's so easy to just fix it with Azure MFA. My favorite one is FIDO2. I'm actually going to link the video right now in the card up here and in the description down below. I have a video about how to set that up. And if you don't have the tokens, you can use the Microsoft Authenticator app. So it's so easy nowadays to have multi-factor authentication that there is no excuse for companies not to have multi-factor authentication enabled. Speaking of authentication, the next one is Azure VMs. And when you're creating them, you have to set up a password for them. And usually people are lazy and just set up a weak password. So it doesn't matter how much you secure your corporate identity. If this is a weak password, for example, like if we try the password at 123, that's a good enough password to put it as a VM password. And we'll talk later about open ports, but like basically all the time there's people scanning the internet to find these VMs and get access to them. So it's very important to set up a very complex password, and if possible, not use password and use SSH keys, or use, for example, our sponsor, EasySSH. They basically remove all this, and now you just use SSH certificates and you don't have to worry about password rotations. Another thing about these passwords is they're set by one employee. They might be shared across the team, and then employees might leave and they might take the password with them. So it's important to also rotate those passwords, make sure that all of it is, if possible, is automated with Terraform or Pulumi or anything to make sure that no one has standing access to these VMs. And that takes us to open ports. As I mentioned here, there's people crawling the internet all the time to try to find open ports with easy to guess passwords. So as you can see here, the default is that it will allow any machine to access your virtual machine. That should be locked down to your specific IP addresses. If you're a corporate, you should have your corporate VPN IP addresses. If you're a home user, you should have only your home IP, or just have Azure networking JIT that will only open the port to your specific IP for the time you request. I actually opened one of my test VM's IP addresses for a few days to see how many people would try. And as you can see, I have thousands of requests per day of failed passwords, just trying different users. You can see like demo, profile, root. So they just kind of like try the most common users and the most common passwords to get in. I actually did the math, and it's around 2.5 million tries per year per VM. So even if you have one VM and your password is hard to guess and it's 1 in a million chance to guess, you're saying that 2 people will be able to guess it. So it's very important to close your ports and have strong passwords. And the last thing I want to talk about is, once again, kind of related to the identity and passwords, is database access. So many companies just use kind of like connection string to a database, and that gets shared among all the employees. And it kind of has the same problems as the VM passwords, that it can be leaked, it can be kept by an old employee, and these ones are very hard to rotate because services also access it. It's not only humans that access the databases. So if possible, if you're using SQL database or something, I would recommend having an admin and just use AAD authentication. You can actually, now it's in preview, you can support AAD authentication only. This removes the SQL authentication altogether. So like it removes having a SQL user and a SQL password, and it makes it so much easier to manage the access to your database and much easier to rotate the passwords and do everything. For databases such as Cosmos DB, and that only have the connection string option and they don't have AAD option, for that one I recommend kind of keeping the connection string on a on an Azure Key Vault that only your service has access to. Humans should not touch the database. It should all be API driven and all infrastructure as code. So those are the top 5 mistakes that people make in Azure security. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.